Well, we could put this in a broader historical context, which only, sort of alta can do. And if you don't know what I mean by that, folks,
Look at us.
look, not, well, he said, look at us. I said, look it up. But,
Okay.
either is fine. But, you know, it seems like a really dumb way to run a government, right? Not to do a budget, not to get it passed, not to, I don't know, be concerned about the deficit, not to be concerned about, you know, uh, uh, reckless spending and so forth. But this is the norm. So you'll forgive my abuse of your name. And this, I, it was in a administration, as you know, the Millard Fillmore administration, but a while back, and I presided over my cabinet, sub cabinet area where I was working twice through a government shutdown in the mid '90s. For 30 years, we've been doing government shutdowns. For 30 years, most of the budgets have been continuing resolutions. For 30 years, the government, the Congress, has abrogated its responsibility to be the keepers of the purse. And there does not seem to be any sign on the horizon that this is going to be set aright by anybody. Do you think this issue, I mean, 30 years later, you would have to say the American people don't seem to care. Do you think it can be presented? I mean, it seems to me that this could be a big issue for somebody. I'm going to make the government work, that kind of thing.
You're absolutely right. What makes this different, Congress historically has had trouble meeting any of these deadlines. They changed the fiscal year, which used to be, January 1, because they wanted to give them more time to be able to put something together, not realizing that the problem wasn't the time to do it. It was that these are enormously significant decisions, and negotiators play end games. But usually what we've seen, if you didn't have radical actors like Newt Gingrich foaming at the mouth to shut down the government, as they did during the Clinton administration, usually what we've seen is that at the brink, they get together and cobble together some kind of a deal, or we'd have a very brief shutdown that fundamentally nobody particularly wanted, but they, needed to give up a little leverage to keep it from blowing up in their faces. It's no way to run a government, but it's one thing if you do this in the nature of bargaining and end games, and find a way to get it resolved by putting together some kind of bipartisan deal. It's another thing when you have a nihilist administration breaking the law on a regular basis, including now with this clearly illegal pocket rescission. A rescission is where the president doesn't spend money that's been lawfully appropriated by Congress. And usually what happens under the law is that after he has done this with relatively modest amounts, Congress can either approve it or stop it from happening. A pocket rescission is where he says, hey, I'm going to keep this till the end of the session, and Congress has no ability to intervene. I am not going to spend money that Congress, under its clear Article 1 responsibility and authority, can do. So they let that stuff go by. When you have an administration that has as a goal blowing up government, getting rid of people, ultimately trying to replace them with your own, but run in effect, the domestic presidency is not in the hands of Donald Trump. It is in the hands of Russell Vought, the head of the Office of Management and Budget, and he is an unreconstructed radical nihilist. So we're in a different place right now. And, one other thing I would say about this, David, traditionally, where the spending packages are put together in individual appropriations bills that aggregate to federal spending in a federal budget, traditionally, those appropriations committees in House and Senate have worked most of those spending deals on a fully bipartisan way. There's give and take. there's compromises here and there. But what's happened in the last number of years is that even when they do this, Republicans then go out and vote against the budget that they painstakingly put together in a bipartisan way. And now in this administration, it is, yeah, let's do it in a bipartisan fashion. But then when Trump steps in and takes out all the money that Democrats have managed to get in as part of the give and take through a rescission, Republicans in the Senate will vote for it, even if they voted for those programs in the first place. So we're in a different place now that is far more insidious and troubling than the failure of Congress to do its job and come up with a budget, and with the president to introduce a budget earlier in the season, that we've had for a very long time, but now is in a very different place.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, on some of our other podcasts for a long time, we would say, "Are we in a constitutional crisis?" And Rosa Brooks, who's a professor of constitutional law, would say, "Close, but no." Like for a couple of years now, throughout the whole last administration, would say, "Well, this is a threat. That's a threat." Because I think we think a constitutional crisis is somebody standing on the steps of the White House and reading a proclamation saying, "We're burning the Constitution, and we declare Donald Trump to be a dictator." But of course, that's not what a constitutional crisis is. There can hardly be any. I mean, there can hardly be anything more fundamental to our Constitution than no one is above the law. But we're past that. Now, there could also, however, hardly be anything more fundamental to the Constitution than the idea that the Congress of the United States sets the budget, and the president, the executive branch, has the job of executing that budget, right? And it seems to me that with these rescissions and the withholding of funds and the acceptance of all of that by the Congress, and the kind of, I don't know, light sprinkling of holy water on it by Alito and company, that's over. The idea that the Congress controls the budget is over if the president can say, "I'll decide where it gets spent. I'll decide what won't get spent." And the Congress can appropriate any amount of money. It doesn't matter because he doesn't have to spend it anymore. And if I were a Democrat, I mean, yeah, I want to defend the healthcare system and all that other stuff, but doesn't somebody at some point have to stand up and say, "No, if Trump doesn't follow the budget, we pull the plug"? We have to do something. We have to wrestle back the power that the Constitution gave to the Congress.
That is exactly what should happen, and what should happen by Tuesday or Wednesday. And we'll see how far they're willing to go. I will say, David, just to slightly redefine what kind of action it would take to say you're in a constitutional crisis, beyond somebody standing at the steps of the White House and declaring it, is what if you had a bunch of people set up a gallows and chant, hang the vice president of the United States while they enter the Capitol, put feces on the walls, and try to murder members of Congress? That, to me, is a pretty good working definition of a constitutional crisis that becomes an even bigger crisis when all of the people who do this are pardoned. So I'd say we've been
And some of them
neck
are.
deep in a constitutional crisis for some time.